afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is May the 30th, 150th day of the year. Just 215 days remain to be years old. With holidays and observances. National Mint Julep Day. European Neighbors Day. Thanksgiving. National Hug Your Cat Day. Loomis Day. It's a chance to learn about telegraphic communications. Martyrdom Day of Sri Guru Arjan Dev Ji. Day to remember his deeds, which work to better humanity. National Creativity Day. National E-Bike Day. National Heat Awareness Day. National Hole in My Bucket Day. National Sophia Day. World MS Day. All of my birthdays. Carly Lawrence. Mark Shepard. He voiced the role of the protagonist Michael Ford in the Conduit video game. Livia Pontoon's birthday. Remy Ma's day. Theo McCoy's birthday. And we've got the Breakaway Music Festival. All right, let's see what we got in the news. Somebody working for the DIA decided he didn't like President Trump. He was going to reveal classified information. And who does he wind up revealing it to? An undercover FBI agent. Not the most brilliant individual. House GOP committee is probing the Nashville mayor who issued an executive order trying to block ICE. Wall Street Journal has the last laugh. They published a story about Biden's mental slide and was castigated by the rest of mainstream media. They weren't loyal. The USDA has arrested one employee and 5 others in a food stamp fraud and bribery scheme that involved $66 million in unauthorized transactions. The Obamas are seen together for the first time in 6 months. Body language experts say there's no love lost between the two of them. Canadian man flipped out at Miami airport, attacked a TSA agent, went on a rampage before he got whomped. President Trump has denounced the court's political tariff decision. Calls another one of God's anointed has tried to block President Trump's activities. One of Diddy's ex-assistants has testified, bolstering the charges against him. Lindsay Lohan has now revealed why she fled Hollywood to go to Dubai for peace and privacy. She fought like hell to get to the top, make all that good Hollywood money, and then once she got it, wasn't happy with it. Venezuelan military officer challenges U.S. intel assessment of the Diago gang. Says they're connected to Maduro, the president of Venezuela. And he says Venezuela is acting as Asia and China and Russia and a number of other foreign countries trying to cause chaos and confusion in South America. In spite of the fact Musk is stepping down, running Doge. He's still going to be involved. Trump said he thought that was great. Todd and Julie Crisley returning to TV after getting a pardon from President Trump. Let's see. A spy surge as a result of President Trump cracking down on Chinese students. There have been several incidents of federal charges against Chinese nationals in American universities. Turns out the cannabis edibles are just as dangerous to heart health as smoking marijuana. Who'd have thunk it? A teen was arrested after breaking into more than 100 cars in Maryland. 16 years old. And typical revolving door efficiency. He was arrested, put back on the street very quickly. We either have crimes for which people are punished, or we don't have crimes. We shouldn't have this revolving door. Harvard DHS lawsuit revives the Supreme Court's conflict of interest questions. 4 Supreme Court justices actually attended Harvard. So should they recuse themselves from the dispute over foreign student visas? Even though God anointed them, there is still the issue of conflict of interest. Harrison Ruffin Tyler, grandson of President John Tyler, dies at the age of 96, marks an end to a direct family link from the 1840s presidency. Democratic officials just back at the Trump administration slapped this county with sanctuary jurisdiction designation. And this designation is about criminalizing immigrants, not protecting the public safety, according to Montgomery County Executive Mark Albert. That's Maryland, don't you know, where they have the revolving door. You break into somebody's car, and even if you get arrested, you're back on the street very quickly. GOP controls the majority of governorships. Democrats are at their lowest tide ever. Ray Jones is warning that African terror groups are gaining the capacity to attack the U.S. homeland. CIA officials said U.S. adversaries are targeting military members in clandestine schemes. Bernie Carrick, a former NYPD commissioner and Trump ally, dies at age 69. Well, 20 years after Natalie Holloway vanished, suspect's confession still leaves a lot of questions. There are those that doubt that Joan Versloot actually acted alone in the 2005 Aruba disappearance. New York teen rushed to save a family, and when he saw their garage catch on fire. A group of high school students jumped into action in upstate New York. They were driving home from their prom when they saw flames in the distance. They didn't think much about it until they passed by a second time and saw it was an entire garage burning. So they went over and knocked on the door and called the people that their house was on fire. President Trump's told the European Union U.S. trade is out of whack. They need to man up. Police have issued an alert for an escaped psychiatric patient who has multiple felony charges. My question would be, why he wasn't locked up if there are numerous felony charges? put him in a psychiatric hospital, but he broke out. Okay. Harvard alumni says the university is fighting President Trump more than they have the anti-Semitism groups on anti-Semitic groups on campus. Fox News' Mike Tobin has reached the summit of Mount Everest, honors U.S. heroes. A 20-foot shark's been spotted in a Rhode Island pond, which is confusing people. Tim Walz's female-hating state just watched a biological boy humiliate a bunch of softball girls. The Democrats keep saying there's nothing wrong with biological males getting into women's sports. But I would submit that there's definitely something wrong with it. Well, let's see what else we got. All right. That takes care of our news. You know, we've been talking about unsolved mysteries, mysterious disappearances, and what I call the UFO murders. We're going to turn from that for today and ask an interesting question. Do sea serpents really exist? There was a paper submitted to the Zoological Society of Britain by an individual named E.G.B. Meade Waldo, June 19, 1906. In that paper, it said his attention was drawn to a large brown fin or frill sticking up out of the water. Dark seaweed brown in color, crinkled at the edge, about 6 feet in length and projected about 18 inches to 2 feet above the water. Said he could see under the water to the rear of the frill the shape of a body, a great head and neck. Didn't touch the frill in the water. When it came out of the water in front of it, the neck appeared to be the thickness of a slight man's body, and 7 to 8 feet of it was out of the water. The head had a very turtle-like appearance, as had also the eye moved its neck from side to side in a peculiar manner. And we have the logbook of the steamer Moonfall, as recorded by C.A.W. Powell, the first mate. It said sighted and passed a monster fish of a serpent shape, about 80 feet long, slimy skin, short fins about 20 feet apart on the back, and the circumference about the dimension of a good-sized whale. Jaws appeared to be about 7 feet long with large teeth. And the crewman of the HMS Daedalus reported sighting a sea serpent in 1848 that was longer than their ship. According to a letter to the Illustrated London News by James Guy, commander of the vessel Imogen, April 15, 1856, in a few minutes it became more distinct, showing an apparent length of about 40 feet. That was the amount above the surface. The undulations of the water extending on each side, a considerable distance in the wake. After passing the ship about half a mile, the serpent rounded to and raised its head, seemingly to look up at us, and then steered away to the northward. January 13, 1852, Captain Seabury, master of the whaler Monongahela, brought his telescope to bear on the monstrous creature thrashing about in apparent agony. 3 longboats went over the side to end the creature's misery. The harpoon struck home, a nightmarish head, almost 10 feet long, rose up out of the water and lunged at the boats. It capsized 2 of the longboats. Heavy line snaked over the bow of the ship as the creatures sounded and dove for the bottom. More than 1,000 feet of line went out before the creature ceased its descent. Rebecca Sims, under the command of Captain Samuel Gabbett, pulled alongside her sister ship, and the floating community of New Bedfordmen discussed the creature with wild speculations and apprehensions. The next morning, the massive carcass had popped up to the surface. It was greater in length than the Monongahela, which measured over 100 feet from bow to stern. This great sea beast had a body about 50 feet in diameter. Its neck was 10 feet in diameter and supported a large alligator-like head that was fully 10 feet long. Whalers counted 94 teeth in its jaws. Saber-like teeth were each about 3 inches long and backward like those of a snake. The color of this creature was brownish gray with a light stripe about 3 feet in width lining its full length. When the sailors tried to render the carcass as if it was a whale, they were disappointed to find it possessed only tough skin and no blubber. Well, Captain Seabury ordered the creature's head to be severed and put in a pickled vat. He's well aware of the ridicule heaped on those who claimed to have seen sea serpents. He was determined to bring back proof of this creature's existence. In addition to this trophy, he wrote out a complete report of the death of the creature and included a lengthy description of its anatomical proportions. Now, he gave his report to a homeward-bound Rebecca Sims. Unfortunately, he didn't deliver the giant head to Captain Gabbett as well. The Monongahela never made its way back to New Bedford with its prize. Then years later, her name board was found on the shore of Hudnall Island in the Aleutians. Well, at this point, you have to be wondering, so a lot of old-time seamen used to see sea serpents. That was a long time ago. Folks aren't so superstitious today, and sea traffic is so heavy. If they were really sea monsters, we'd catch one. Well, you might be partially correct. Those individuals who've occasioned to be on the sea still spot large, unidentifiable creatures of serpentine appearance and incredible proportions, but even with increased sea traffic and improved sailing vessels, these massive creatures remain impervious to capture. There are, however, a number of full-time sea serpent and lake monster hunters, and it may not be too far in the future before our zoos feature real-life sea monsters for a Sunday afternoon viewing. Such a capture should take place, and one thing is certain, the zoos will still need enormous tanks on which to keep these creatures. In March of 1969, 2 fishermen angling off the City Island Bridge near the Bronx, New York, claimed to have seen a giant sea creature moving in the deep channel used by the oil tankers that traveled up and down the Hutchinson River. Fishermen described the creature as being slimy, black, and gray, and bigger than anything they'd ever seen before. While harbor police investigated the situation, didn't find anything, but they were soon called to Long Island Sound to look into a similar report from Little Neck Bay in Queens. Here's something larger than a whale, something that couldn't be identified by longtime fishermen based on their experience while exploring the bays of New York City. At that same time, on the other side of the world, North American Newspaper Alliance reporters were writing this story told by 14 Hong Kong University students who saw a big black creature with green eyes staring at them only 20 yards offshore. According to Benjamin Chang, students had heard a crying noise from out in the water. One of the girls looked up, screamed, and later said, "I looked out to the sea, and about 20 yards from us, a big black creature was rising up out of the water." She said, "I yelled out, Kai Kwai, or Sea Devil, and all the others ran up and saw it too." Students estimated this creature was 20 to 30 feet in length, and they insisted the thing made a loud crying noise. It was definitely not a fish, according to all of them. something larger than a whale churning about near New York City, a gigantic creature with green eyes and eerie voice. Question becomes, could either of those sightings have anything to do with the massive something that was washed up on a Mexican beach March 7, 1969? At first, this huge blob was declared to be the remains of some prehistoric creature that had fallen out of a drifting iceberg. And two biologists at the Mexican Navy's Marine Biology Station at Tampico declared the hulk was kind of an oversized sperm whale. Other scientists countered by pointing to the rare horn and shoulder blade as evidence the creature could hardly be a whale of any kind. This thing was dragged in with the aid of tractors and 100 fishermen and soldiers tugging on cables tied to its carcass. An estimate of the weight was made difficult by the mutilations of sharks and superstitious fishermen, but tests indicated that the creature had weighed somewhere between 12 and 35 tons. You can only wish that the actor-producer Coronel Miles, cameraman, had nimble fingers when they were shooting Beach Red in the Philippines. If they'd been a little quicker on the trigger, there might have been a strip of film showing a rather vicious sea creature in violent action. According to Harrison Carroll, who described his experience in his column in the Los Angeles Herald Examiner, December 27, 1966, they were shooting off Boeing. After the firing of some underwater charges, some kind of giant sea monster surfaced beside the boats. They said it had the flat head of a snake and a long serpent-like body. While they were trying to get it on board a boat, it bit the steel shaft off an underwater spear. That ended that. The creature sank again into the water. In May 1965 issue of Fate magazine, Edward Brian McCleary told of his escape from the sea monster. According to McCleary, he and 4 friends left on Saturday afternoon, March 24, 1962, to go skin diving at the Sunken, Massachusetts in Pensacola Bay. It's in Florida, don't you know? Sudden storm sent the boys into the ocean, and they hung onto their rubber raft. After the squall subsided, a heavy oppressive fog rolled in. According to McCleary, the misty air became filled with the odor of dead fish. But about 40 feet away, we heard this tremendous splash, and the waves reached the raft and broke over the sides. But whatever it was, they knew that no boat had made that sound. Then they heard the splash again, and through the fog, they saw what looked like a 10-foot pole with a bulbous head on top. They directed for a moment and then bent in the middle and dove under the water. And a sickening smell filled the air. Well, from out of the fog came a strange, high-pitched whine. 5 young men panicked, slipped on their fins, and dove into the water. They decided to keep together and try for the portion of the wreck Massachusetts remained above water. And back of them, they could hear whatever it was splashing and making a strange hissing sound. Then they heard this terrible scream. It lasted maybe half a minute. McCleary said, "I heard one call, 'Hey, help me. It's Scott Brad. I've got to get out of here.' And then his voice was cut off. The remaining swimmers clustered together, and not knowing how many feet of ocean separated them from whatever it was, they tried to figure out what to do, and then McCleary said, 'Eric, what happened to Larry? He was here a minute ago.' Well, the 2 remaining boys dove for their friend, didn't find him. And Eric got a cramp in his leg, and McCleary wrapped his arm around his neck, continued toward the wreck, and then a wave broke over and separated them, and McCleary surfaced. He saw Eric swimming ahead of him. And then what happened next is the stuff of which nightmares are made. He said right next to Eric, that telephone-like figure broke the water. I could see this neck and 2 small eyes. The mouth opened up, it bent over, dove on top of Eric and drug him under. I screamed, began to swim past the ship, and he said I was shaking uncontrollably. Somehow McCleary managed to swim the remaining 2 miles to shore. There was a strange montage of sprawling on the beach, stumbling to a tower of some sort, spending the night in a fitful slumber, and then falling on his face in front of another group of boys. The next he awoke, and he was in the Pensacola Naval Base Hospital. Well, none of the journalists told all the facts of his escape from the sea creature that took the lives of his 4 friends. Each of the various local newspapers carried the story of the tragedy, but they all attributed the boy's death to accidental drowning. A few reporters told McCleary the sea serpent was best left unmentioned. Well, McCleary wrote that he asked the director of the search and rescue unit, E. McGovern, if he believed his story about the monster. When McCleary, McGovern responded, the sea has a lot of secrets. There are a lot of things we don't know about. And people don't believe these things because they're afraid to. And he said, yes, I believe you, but there's not much else I can do. Well, there wasn't much else that the Gugg brothers of Littleford, Maine could do either. It was Monday, August 7th, 1967, when they hauled up a partial skeleton of the oddest looking thing they'd ever seen. The Guggies are lobstermen, and Richie pulled up the skull remains while he was searching in an outboard motorboat for one of the lobster traps off the southern Maine coast. What appeared to be the snake-like head and neck of some underdetermined creature was over 8 feet long. Well, Peter, one of the brothers, remarked that the eye sockets on the head were so big he could put his fist into each one of them. The eyes were on the side of the head like a snake's. Bits of flesh still clung to some of the vertebra. Story with the accompanying pictures of the skeleton widely circulated by the United Press. Many people who came to view the remains agreed with the Guggies that the thing looked exactly like a sea monster on a lookalike. According to old records, an enormous sea serpent inhabited the waters of Gloucester Bay for 2 weeks in August of 1817. Many seamen and fishermen who saw the creature at fairly close quarters testified that the thing was nearly 140 feet long. They contended the sea serpent wiggled like a snake, possessed a row of coils that rose 8 or 10 inches above the water. This behemoth appeared to have sought the sanctuary of the harbor in order to give birth to its young. One of these little creatures was killed on an island, and it was exhibited by the Essex Coffee House in Gloucester. The brown baby monster was reported to have measured 3 feet in length and was said to have had 32 humps on its back. Rotting hulk of some massive unidentifiable creature lay on the beach in Tasmania for at least 2 years before a representative of the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization decided to investigate. 3 cattlemen had discovered the remains on the island's northwest coast in August of 1960, but their sketches and reports of the dead creature didn't cause much excitement until Bruce Mollison, creator of the vertebrate mammals, decided to trek into the rugged wilderness for a closer look. He was surprised the carcass hadn't deteriorated into nothingness over the 2 years it had lain on the beach, exposed to the elements. Although a good deal of the strange humped creature had rotted away, Mollison quickly became convinced the thing he was studying wasn't any known species of fish or mammal. He was certain the 28-foot long, 18-foot broad creature had been a variety of whale, squid, ray, or the like. Skin was hard and rubbery and covered with a greasy, straggly kind of hair. Several rows of spines and on phalanges skirted its rear. Experts at the Royal Prince Albert Hospital identified the flesh of the creatures belonging to unknown species. Field expedition of the CSIRO went directly to the carcass itself to test Mollison's report and to hack and chop off their own specimens. And they reported back they couldn't identify the sea creature either. Then, as so often happens in these cases, a certain representative of officialdom issued the pronouncement that since the flesh of the creature was something like the blubber of a whale, the creature, therefore, had to be a whale. Mollison expressed his shock at the official CSIRO report, and ranchers who discovered the rotting carcass fumed that they bloody well knew what a whale looked like, and this thing wasn't a whale. So I guess the question is, what are we supposed to determine from this? Scientists are always claiming and clamoring for a live sea monster to they can examine it. If the monsters really do exist, bring us one to examine, they would used to laugh. And you have to wonder if some of these learned men would know what to do with one if they got their hands on it. On the other hand, the ranchers and curator of vertebrate anatomy may have been mistaken. It could have been a whale with a hump and shaggy hair. An identified sea creature that appeared off the New Jersey coast August 19, 1963. Couldn't have had a more appreciative audience. According to the New York Times, initial sightings made with Dr. Lionel Walford, director of the Fish and Wildlife Research Center of the U.S. Department of the Interior, Sandy Hook, New Jersey. Dr. Walford cautioned the reporter not to say that scientists had seen a sea serpent, but the expert did provide an excellent description of whatever it was that he had seen. He said it was 40 feet in length, about 5 inches thick, and maybe 700 inches deep. It looked something like an enormous, long, flattened eel. I found them made a tentative identification of it as what's known as a Venus girdle, a jelly-like creature. That's according to Dr. Walford. Upon examining any scientific references, I soon surprisingly determined that the Venus girdle doesn't go any longer than a few feet. No amount of research I could do provided me with the proper identification of this strange creature. That was Dr. Walford's addendum. Obviously, his sighting was of an unidentified sea creature of much less heroic proportions than many of the others we've talked about. May 12, 1964, 3 men on board the Norwegian fishing boat Blue Sea reported they'd seen a 60-foot sea monster near Nantucket Island. Alf Williamson was the first to sight the creature and yelled at his brother Jens and his partner Marty Holland to look at the gigantic creature swimming a few hundred feet away from their 80-foot boat. According to the Norwegian fisherman, the creature had an alligator-like head and a lobster-like tail. The body was dotted with black and white spots and had a series of hump on its otherwise smooth back. When they sailed into New Bedford Harbor to report their sighting to the U.S. Bureau of Commercial Fisheries, Coast Guard vessels and fishing boats set out to search for it. 3 days later, the creature was spotted by the crew of the dragger Friendship in an area about 10 miles from where the Norwegians had seen it. Friendship circled this creature twice so the crew could get a good look at it. Captain Albert Pike gave a description of a alligator-headed serpent that matched the one given by the Norwegians. The creature swam at a speed of 5 knots and didn't bother to submerge once during the 20 minutes in which it was under observation by the Friendship. Unfortunately, the crewmen didn't bring the 60-foot creature back alive, but they did add another well-attested sighting to the history of sea serpents. Some scientists have entertained, with some degree of seriousness, the popular speculation that sea monsters may be surviving members of one of the species of giant sea reptiles from the Mesozoic era. It seems that no one's ever offered a completely satisfactory explanation for the quite rapid extinction of giant reptiles. Dinosaurs on the land, pterosaurs in the air, and massive multi-toned ichthyosaurs and palosaurs in the sea. 19th century naturalist Philip Goss was an exponent of the Blundersaurus theory to explain the sea serpents. He argued although the Mesozoic age had ended tens of millions of years ago, there was no reason why one of the descendants of those giant sea reptiles couldn't have survived. Our own centuries produced evidence that makes it easier to give his theory some credence. For example, the discovery of a supposedly extinct fish off southeast Africa. Fish that have survived almost unchanged for 70 million years, since before the age of reptiles. Other scientists championed the hypothesis that the sea serpent's stories may be attributed to sightings of giant eels. Dr. Maurice Burton points out in his book, Living Fossils, that in recent years, eel larvae 3 feet long have been discovered. If you compare the relative size of the larvae and adults and eels of normal size, according to Burton, there's no reason such giant larvae should attain a length of 36 feet when full grown. Beginning in the 1960s, Dr. Anton Brun of the University of Copenhagen, Denmark, announced that the acquisition of an eel larva more than 6 feet long, with 450 vertebral plates. Only known eels have but 105 vertebral plates. Brun, once again, working with the comparative size of larvae and adults and eels of normal size, reasoned that the larva could easily grow into a monster 90 feet long and weighing several tons. Well, a certain number of marine zoologists favored the existence of a yet undiscovered aquatic mammal related to the whales as their candidates for the roles of sea serpent. They contend that the hairy manes and flippers so often reported on the serpents could be most unlikely appendages for true reptiles, and quite convincingly they argue that only warm-blooded mammals would be able to survive in the icy waters of the North Atlantic, where so many of the classic sea monster stories have had their origin. The zoologists have expanded the theory of an unidentified giant sea mammal and combined it with another possible survivor of prehistoric times. They theorize that an ancient species of whale, the Albadan of the Basilosaurus, whose fossil remains are well known, could be well equipped for the role of sea monster. Basilosaurus is known to have been a huge beast with a slim, elongated body measuring only 70 feet in length. Its skull is long and low, and the behemoth propelled itself by means of a single pair of fins located at its forward end. The Basilosaurus is known to have survived into the Eocene epoch, just over 30 million years ago. If the Crossopterygian fish have survived for more than 70 million years, it seemed quite possible that such a comparative youngster as the Basilosaurus could still be inhabiting our seas. And if that's the case, what is it that's inhabiting our lakes? According to R.R. McEwen, an individual from Inverness, Scotland, I saw a big commotion in the water, then a thing like a rather thick periscope appeared, moved along from right to left, accompanied by a giant disturbance about the periscope and behind it. Now, Mr. McEwen was an attorney. In spite of that, he's referring to an experience that took place at Loch Ness, Scotland. Now, of course, there are no submarines in the lake, as far as we know, so it would appear that there might be a whole tribe of lake monsters. They've been reported there for hundreds of years. After centuries of keeping an eye out for Nessie, St. Columba made the first recorded sighting in 565 AD. It appears that some solid scientific proof is building up to demonstrate that the legendary monster Loch Ness is truly more than just a legend. Then Mr. Skelton is a technician of the Loch Ness Phenomenal Investigative Bureau. Claims to have seen Nessie more than any other man, because he's looked at that lot probably more than anybody else. He confessed that to Godfrey Anderson of the Associated Press that Nessie was his personal Moby Dick. He said, "We have one of the largest creatures in the world in this loch. We don't know what it is. It's challenging, it's exciting, and it's infuriating." Volunteer monster researchers work in relays from mid-May to mid-October. Each volunteer is equipped with long pads, field glasses, and movie cameras with telephoto lenses. Whenever anybody snaps anything, the film is immediately sent to the Defense Ministry's Joint Air Reconnaissance Center for careful analysis. That's JARIC. And the JARIC comprises the same group of experts who in 1943 successfully pinpointed the Nazi secret V-2 rocket base at Peenemünde, Germany from aerial reconnaissance photos. So they would be well qualified to try to figure out what Nessie might be. According to JARIC, the monster watchers and photographers have seen things that really do exist. once when the experts identified a strip of film as being a secret to two animate objects weighing about 1.5 tons each. Even the then Air Force minister, Lord Shackleton, had to swallow his often their disbelief in monsters. He said, I find it hard to discount the findings of the JRIC reports. Tim Dinsdale, a member of the JRIC team, says the 12 to 16 foot long thing he photographed, traveling at a speed of 10 knots, was almost certainly an animate. January 24th, 1966, the Royal Air Force issued its analysis of the Dinsdale film strip. According to the report, the RAF zeroes in on the hump of the creature and determines it's moving at a speed of about 10 miles an hour. After a lot of technical discussion about the relative size and perspective of the solid black approximately triangular shape, and a comparison of the unidentified creature with a motorboat moving in the same area, filmed immediately after Nessie had swung past, the RAF concedes the object is not a surface vessel. And they also said you can presumably rule out the idea that it's any sort of submarine vessel for various reasons, which leaves the conclusion it's probably an animate object. Look at a breeding herd of creatures of such dimensions. Skeleton estimates there may be 20 or 30 in the lake. But can a breeding herd actually exist in a lake? And the answer is yes, if the lake is the size of Loch Ness. Scots have been talking about some big fish and a little scow all these years. Loch Ness is 24 miles long by a mile across. It's got a mean depth of 433 feet, twice that of the North Sea, into which it flows through the River Ness at its eastern end. It's fed by 5 rivers and 50 mountain streams. The loch never freezes over, and snow rarely lies near its shores. Temperature remains fairly constant at about 42 degrees Fahrenheit, summer or winter. David James, a former member of the British Parliament and head of the Loch Ness Phenomena Investigative Bureau, summed up the conclusions of the Bureau in the spring of 1968. He said, let's get one thing straight. There's no Loch Ness monster that has lived for a few thousand or a million years. What we're investigating is the possibility of a herd, breeding, evolving like any other species in water such as these, cut off from the sea for 5,000 to 7,000 years. We know to say one thing is perfectly clear, there's something there. Too many reliable people have seen too much with too little possibility for coincidence, connivance, or conjuration to pass the entire matter off as only a figment of somebody's imagination. In 1968, through a 3-year grant from the Field Enterprises Educational Corporation of Chicago, the Bureau came into possession of more sophisticated photographic search equipment, biopsy darts, and other advanced research materials. Professor Roy Mackle, University of Chicago biologist, is head of the American branch of the Bureau. He theorizes that the type of creature that most fits the mass of descriptive evidence and photos has to be some kind of large aquatic mammal that would be capable of thriving above 50 degrees north latitude. Even with all the age of modern science, the search for Nessie is still a difficult task. The water in Loch Ness becomes a murky brown just a few feet down and filled with floating particles of peat. Such a condition makes all the standard underwater exploration techniques relatively useless. And depth sounding becomes difficult because the sides of Loch Ness are too sheer. So what about the fact that no monster carcasses have ever washed ashore? Well, according to Bureau members, the sides of the loch are steep. The bottom is deep with mud and no tides in the loch that would push dead hulks ashore. It appears, though, that a team of sonar experts may have had definite success during an expedition in August of 1968. The equipment they used was chiefly developed by David Tucker, head of the Electronic Engineering Department at Birmingham University. The results of the 2 weeks of sonar probing was reported in the British journal New Scientist. The study seems to provide evidence that a family of monsters does indeed inhabit the waters of Loch Ness. According to Tucker, in one 13-minute period, sonar echoes defined large objects moving underwater. A massive object recorded swimming at a speed as high as 17 miles an hour and diving at a rate of 450 feet a minute. He said from the evidence we have, there's some animal life in the loch whose behavior is difficult to reconcile with that of a fish. It's a temptation to suppose the echoes must be the fabulous Loch Ness monster. Although Nessie's far away the most famous of all monsters inhabiting inland bodies of water, there are reports of equally large, equally bizarre aquatic creatures in lochs all over the world. In 1858, Dr. Vadim Vladikov, it's like Pohenigamut, question of witnesses who claimed to have seen a monster flashing about in the Lake Country, 200 miles east of Quebec City. He was the director of the Quebec Department of Game and Fisheries, a man whose opinion on the monster was certainly worth a great deal. He said, "I've questioned a great many people in St. Louis. That's a large village in the area, and they all describe the same thing: an animal between 12 and 18 feet long, brown and black in color, with a round back 2 or 3 feet wide, and a sawtooth fin down in the center." Anytime anybody approaches close, the creature slithers away and sneaks below the lake's surface. Later on, he remarked, "It's probably a big fish, though it just might be something else." And has to be something else unless there are gigantic fish in Quebec that venture out on land and swim back to the water when somebody approaches. The lakes in the Great Group, including Lake Manitoba and Winnipegosis, have had a long continuing history of something big and strange, frightening the fishermen. In 1960, Professor James McLeod, head of the Department of Zoology at the University of Manitoba, left the environs of the campus to investigate. And then before his departure, he announced that something was probably just a big snapping turtle. But then it was discovered that a fisherman had made a model of a peculiar-looking bone he had found near the shore. Unfortunately, the original had been destroyed in fire, but either the fisherman was a whiz at paleontology, or he had actually made a replica of a bone from a creature believed extinct for millions of years. Professor McLeod was no longer interested in looking for giant snapping turtles. He allowed that giant prehistoric reptile that once lived in that area might somehow have survived. Of course, he said we're skeptical, but it's a scientific possibility. According to longtime monster hunter Aventine Sanderson, the real hotbed of freshwater monsters on the North American continent is the Canadian Rockies, extending into Montana and Idaho. According to Sanderson, there are literally dozens of lakes in which Amerindian myth and legend and folklore associate monstrous water animals. Among these are several in which White Man has said what they've seen is inexplicable. And there are dozens or so that have continuing Loch Ness-like traditions. Sanderson lists Ogopogo, the denizen of Lake Okanagan in British Columbia, the Tazama and the Tsinskwa of Lake Shuswap and Colachin in the same area, and the Oogabogos of Lake Waterton and Flathead in Montana as being one of the more famous of our inland water creatures. According to the zoologist Ryder, reports on the Oogabogos have been recorded for decades. Some witnesses have credited the creatures with lengths up to 60 feet. Sanderson reported that most of these unidentified swimming things are described as having cow-like heads that at the end of long, slender necks with humps behind. He calls them long necks, and he's amassed documents to prove they exist in every country in the world, even in Russia. Now, the press, national reports not long ago, gave information concerning a monster that terrorized Siberia's Lake Fororta. Is reported to roar and was described as spherical and horrible to see. The creature had allegedly eaten a swimming dog, a reindeer, and a determined number of human beings. Geologist Victor, I can't begin to pronounce his last name, recalled for the press what he had seen in nearby Lake Nicker in 1953. He said it was an ominous-looking dark gray spear that sloped slightly above the water. It inspired nearly uncontrolled fear as it approached. It resembled an oversized, glistening tin barrel with a slanted horn rudder on its back. Two bulging protrusions that might have been eyes about 7 feet apart on the head. The creature reached the bank, stopped, and went into a series of convulsions which raised waves and fountains of water as it disappeared below. He said there's no question about the creature's intentions. It was headed straight for us, and only when the ripple of water it had reached our feet was it the hypnotic spell broken, able to flee the water and escape not a moment too soon. So if you think there's no such thing as sea serpents, they might not really be serpents. Their size may from time to time become rather exaggerated, but how many of us would have stayed in the water, face down the creature from which Victor and his friends had fled? You know, the stories of Loch Ness Monster have been around as long as I can remember. And the first sighting was supposedly in 564 by St. Columba, who allegedly faced it down by using the name of the Lord. Well, there's no question there's something. The question is what? Well, you're talking about mysteries of the sea. Not only do we have sea serpents, we also have mystery ships. And we really don't have enough time to start a new topic. So we'll be back tomorrow and talk more about mysteries of the sea. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a truly great